Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, on a glorious sunny Sunday. 49 degrees and the snow is melting. Now, they say what a difference 24 hours makes. Yesterday at this time, it was snowing sideways. We got a conservative 12 inches, if not more, of wet, heavy glue. Like when I would back drag with the tractor blade, if I ran over it with my tires, I couldn't plow it. It would just be a hump. So I'd have to, fortunately with the tractor, I could change the angle of the cutting edge, but just by moving the angle of the blade. And I could scrape it enough to do something with it. And today, less than 24 hours later, it stopped snowing last night around 5 o'clock. That's when I cleaned up for the last time. I had to plow 3 times. Today, half of my driveway is dry. It's not only melted, but it's dry. And there's massive buildup on every roof that I have. My vehicles, I've just been outside cleaning them off. My propane tanks were completely engulfed in snow, and that can lead to no heat. I learned that from a propane guy. Don't ask me chemically what happens, but they need to be, they don't mind cold air, but they can't be insulated with snow. So take that for what it is. I'm not a propanologist, but that much I know. So I shoveled a path to my tanks because I'm also due for another delivery. Yay, at $5 a gallon, whatever it is. But anyway, today I am celebrating the fact that I finally finished this transmission. It wasn't that it was hard or took that long to do. It took the average amount of time, a couple days, all told, stripping it, cleaning it, putting it back together and doing the modifications. But life got in the way. So now I can start on the Cadillac transmission. I'm pointing over here. You can't see it, but trust me, it's next. A quick note about my ongoing audio problems. I film everything with an iPhone, which a lot of people do. And I always had trouble behind the mic. My voice would modulate up and down, but in front of the camera like this, I never had a problem. Right around Christmas, I got a iPhone X Pro. I buy them refurbished, a couple $100, and that's the way we do it. So I'm a few models behind, but it was the best phone I had to date. 256 gig for memory, which is really handy when you shoot videos. But the speaker was definitely challenging, and I learned I need to turn the volume down when I'm behind the camera, and that had pretty much solved my sensitivity problems with the mic. I shot a video day before yesterday about the Hirsch shifters, and in this position you could hardly hear me, but behind the camera I was wall to wall and treetop tall, they say, back in CB lingo. So today I'm trying a few more adjustments, but I also listened to the comments, and I've ordered a lapel microphone. It'll be here this week. I hope it's not too sensitive and you don't hear me deep breathing all the time and sound like I'm talking with it in my throat, but hey, we're gonna find out. We'll give it a shot. But for today, I'm trying a couple different settings. Not like I have a whole lot of choices, but I just got the volume turned down, which should decrease the sensitivity. It's what I do when I'm behind the camera, and it works really well. So I'm gonna put this video together and see what happens. And always looking for new ways to talk about the Turbo 400. Today, I'm gonna tell you what I did without showing you anything. I have lots of videos showing and doing. Today, we're just gonna talk about what I did. Just a different angle. We'll go back to live action soon, trust me. So, if you watched the video where I took it apart and talked about all the pieces, for reassembly, the lower unit, I just put a new set of bearings in, which have the extra rollers. This had the early Torrington bearings with only a roller every other, if you will. So when you buy the replacement kit, they're really cool. I wish I'd saved the packages, but they tell you the position they go in. But I always look at the book, no matter how many times you do it. I just want to make sure I have everything facing the right direction. I'm only human, and you think you know something and you make a simple mistake like that, it will tell you because it won't let you put the center support bolt and the snap ring in, the beveled snap ring. So it'll tell you right off the bat. So it already had a roller thrust bearing and shim. I changed the bearings in the lower unit and stuck that in. The intermediate clutches, I removed the wave plate and reinstalled it with 3 steels and 3 clutches like it had. It already had a version of a case saver, actually a pretty neat one, the one that hooks under the center support snap ring, and then it grabs the intermediate snap ring. And it sits on the pin where the front band used to be. Sonic sells them, among others. This one was aluminum, which is kind of odd. Usually they're made of steel. Not that heavy a piece, but hey, it seems to latch in there pretty good. You do have to grind the intermediate pressure plate so it clears. For the direct drum, I completely replaced it because it had a roller clutch instead of a sprag. So I had a nice Turbo 400 round back drum, pretty rare. I didn't need to use a 480E drum with the wider sprag race because I was only going to use 3 intermediate clutches and steels each, three each. So I didn't see the need to put a 480E drum in there. And I had a nice Chevy drum with a brand new 34 element sprag right out of the package. Forward drum, I took it apart. Now here's a kind of a funny note. I leave the center seal out of the forward drum always. But when I take apart a name brand transmission, I like to see what they did. So I could have just reassembled the drum and put it back in, but I had to know if the seals were good. Again, this transmission was brand new, so it's not like it needed new lip seals. But I needed to know how they did it. So I took it apart, and lo and behold, they leave the drum seal off as well. And it's funny, I've never actually done it before, but when you take the piston out, if you're going to put it right back in, I had my tool set up, but it just falls right back in there because it just came out. It hasn't had time to expand, so it kind of falls right back in place. So that's pretty neat. I mentioned in the previous video about this transmission that part of the challenges, because I'm taking a transmission that was built with a manual valve body from FTI, this is an FTI transmission, I did not download the instructions for the manual reverse pattern valve body. That would have been smart, but I pretty much knew what to look for, and I checked everything to make sure there wasn't anything blocked or modified, and the only thing I found was the boost valve had a flat cut on it, if you can see that, which is a common modification when you're converting a stock valve body to full manual and you remove the modulator and put a solid plug in there so that the modulator no longer regulates pressure. You have fixed line pressure, if you will, and you increase the pressure regulator spring. The boost valve in reverse, they say it makes pressure that's too high and will damage things, so that's why you cut a flat in it. And you typically also plug a hole in the case, which was not plugged, so they must have dealt with it somewhere else. But I did dig through my stuff and find an unmodified boost valve because the instructions with the FTI Transbrake do not tell you to do that. So they've dealt with the rise in reverse pressure somewhere else when they built the valve body. This has a billet aluminum valve body, and that is the nuances of whoever built the valve body and how they chose to deal with different things. So you're not privy to that information. All you have is the instruction sheet, and they always go from the perspective that you're dealing with a stock transmission, not one that's been previously modified. So knowing that, I knew that that should be a stock boost valve, and that's what I did. I found it interesting that this valve body by FTI is very similar to the ATD automatic transmission design valve bodies that I use all the time, with some differences. The instructions even looked very similar, the pitches and whatnot. Internally, not much different. When it came to the reverse servo, ATD has you throw everything here completely away, And you do not run a bigger spring. You'd run just the spring that's on the servo. FTI provided a giant spring, but do not want you to set it in the piston with the rings removed. They want you to just run it right over the servo spring. So that's what I did, because that's what the instructions said to do. And it's definitely a firm piece. The FTI valve body separator plate has, I want to call it a gasket, but it's almost like it's rubber coated. It did not require any alignment. It was stuck on both sides. Probably is a good deal. It makes up for any case imperfections, even though they warned you to make sure it's perfectly flat. But down the road, I like the idea of not having valve body gaskets, because when it comes to maintenance time, you don't have to worry about it. But I guess you can cross that bridge when you come to it. They seemed like they were pretty hardy and definitely thicker than a normal gasket, but I didn't try to peel them off because they're stuck right to it. And the floating check ball, everything's glued right in there. The manual valve was in it. It was taken out of the package and stick it on. One other difference is with the ATD valve body, you grind the stock modulator valve, which becomes a scheduling valve for the Transbrake external solenoid. Well, you can't see it, it's on the other side. FTI gives you the modified valve and spring combination and a giant trash can style solenoid, and you just bolt it together. Pretty simple. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. I actually like, and will swear by the ATD, but I found nothing wrong with the FTI valve body. I haven't tried it yet. This is a Sportsman version. They tell you in tenths of a second how long it takes to release. For those that care, I guess the difference between a Pro Tree brake and a Sportsman brake, the Pro Tree brake is supposed to be faster. Nowhere in the instructions of the F4009B FTI valve body, they tell you the shift pattern being reverse. They do not tell you whether you have to push the button in reverse. Typically a Pro brake you do, and a Sportsman brake you don't. This one does not say, so I'm going to assume it's going to back up in reverse. Time will tell. And then it came down to the Bellhousing installation. And I was going to use the O-rings that come with the JW Ultra Bell. This one is the LS specific one, they leave the top bolt and it doesn't have the bunny ears. And the instructions were a little bit different than I've seen before. It tells you areas you can modify and still be SFI approved. They let you drill a couple of holes depending on what it is, like a Power Glide case shield has to anchor into the Bellhousing, so they cover all that. You can mount your dipstick to it. They give you a little map about where you can modify it and where you can't. But for installation, they give you the O-rings, the dreaded O-rings that I dislike, mostly because they also want you to seal the washer with silicone, RTV. If they provided a flange bolt, which is probably on par, if not less expensive than having to buy bolts and washers, you could just use the factory pump bolt washers, sealing washers, because you have to install them all through the housing and then put the O-ring over the bolt, because there's no way to do it. You can't drop it on and go through the O-rings onto the case. So I thought about it, and I also had out for delivery yesterday, but it was snowing, was 250 flange bolts to restock my supply, and I would have used these, the stock Turbo 400 sealing washers, and the ATI gasket. So yesterday, my bolts were at my local post office, 6:30 in the morning. When that happens, it gets delivered the same day. There was once a saying, rain or sleet or snow, the mail must go, or whatever they used to say. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. They don't even attempt delivery. I can't say as I blame them, but I didn't get my bolts until today. They're delivering regular mail on a Sunday. For a long time, they've been delivering Amazon on Sunday, but not regular mail. So at least they're making up for yesterday, and I just got my bolts. But too late, I used a tiny bit of sealer under the washer like they tell you. If you're careful, you don't even see it. And I use the ATI gasket, the ATI 2000044G. It's $5, whatever they cost. And just so much easier to put a couple studs on the pump. Now, when I put the pump into the case, in this case, I was able to get 7 bolts in it. I drilled them. There was already a drilled and tapped hole in the case. I just had to drill the back side of the pump. No big deal. And this one I just silicone up. It goes nowhere, but I just don't want things collecting in it. And 7 bolts is fine. They all 3, ATI, JW, and BTE tell you that 6 is fine, 7's better, and 8 is the best. So in this case, there was no option for the 8th bolt down here. There's no case there, so there's no boss in the case. So when I installed the pump for final, I got the seals and gasket on it. I put all 7 bolts in it to make sure everything is relaxed. And then I removed the bolts, put a couple studs in, set my ATI gasket over the studs. And then all you do is set the Bellhousing on. And in this case, put a little dab of sealer on each position and use the bolts that came with it. So it'll be fine, but I prefer the old flange bolt. So I have 250 of those now. I had a box before that I used them all and forgot to restock. So the last Bellhousing I did was only a few weeks ago, and I completely forgot. So now I have them in stock. One final note, I will give JW partial credit because they give you M10 1.5 Bellhousing bolts because this is much thicker. But you know me, I'm kind of picky. I'm kind of a bolt snob, a fastener snob. When you go to your local hardware store and buy a metric bolt, instead of your M10 1.5 bolt having a 15 millimeter hex on the end like you're used to, if you work on any American-made vehicle these days, an M10 1.5 bolt has a 15 millimeter head. The ones that I buy M10 1.5 bolts in various lengths for like the tail housing, for the mount, etc. The ones I buy have a 15 millimeter head. When you buy the cheapies, they have a 17 millimeter head, and that's what these have. So now, when you go to pull your transmission out, if you remove a lot of transmissions, it's either going to be a 3/8 bolt with a 9/16 head or an M10 1.5 with a 15 millimeter head. Now you're going to be dumbfounded when these are 17 millimeter, but hey, at least they tried to provide the hardware. So whoever's ordering the hardware at JW just needs a lesson that there's better things out there for probably on par or less money, who knows. But the customer would be a lot happier. I'm not the first one to complain about the hardware. But again, don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. At least they give you the hardware. Again, I don't anything against JW. I don't communicate with them, don't know anything about them, other than they do provide some pretty nice transmission parts. And their Bellhousing is the most expensive on the market. So maybe there's enough room to give you the right hardware. But again, they're probably never going to hear my video or watch it, and the message may never get delivered. As a final note, this was the first assembly using my transmission tools, now housed in my new to me rolling tool cart. And I feel really efficient. It was really fun. Again, I did the transmission assembly different. I did all the sub-assemblies first, with the exception of the pump because I had to drill the extra hole and I hadn't got to that yet. And I knew that I had to dig up an unmodified boost valve. So I did all that, enjoyed myself putting it together, and on to the next one. I hope you enjoy your Sunday. Go enjoy whatever it is you're doing, and I'll do the same. Catch you later.